Thank you, Michael. Let me welcome Dr. Emil Dardak to be the next speaker.
Right, very good morning to all ladies and gentlemen. We have a distinguished panelist here, especially I think we have the Deputy Governor of Jakarta here as well with us, and also I believe distinguished also delegates in the audience. I see here Dr. Atif Ansar from Oxford, Major Program Management Program Director. It's very good to see you. Yeah. And yeah, just quickly, we have limited time, so I have been asked by the chairman to focus on the perspective of innovation in infrastructure in terms of a rural and small town perspective. So it's a bit different from what we often see and from what I often speak, because before I become a Bupati or a region, I actually worked in the guarantee fund and in infrastructure financial fund, financial institutions. So we keep talking about the mega projects. We keep talking about the big power plants, about the major toll roads. And now I'm actually leading a region which is actually in terms of size is quite big. It's twice the size of Singapore and Jakarta. It's a 1,300 square kilometer, populations of nearly 1 million. But the whole challenges of infrastructure are different from what we face in metropolitan areas. So next slide. I would like to devote the first part. Next. Oh, okay. In the background, I would like to first focus more on the regional development and urban-rural aspects. So I just came back from a very interesting session in Bogota. It's the United Cities and Local Government, where all mayors and governors, they all meet there. And what we found out from, I think a study by LSE, Urban Center, that the world is getting increasingly urbanized, and 50% of the population occupies about 0.5% of the land area in the world. So getting density is getting really high, and the thing of the future in terms of urban development has been people mobility. They're trying to really cut down on vehicle use. They try to increase efficiency of people mobility. They try to basically make sure that shift towards the use of bikes. Public transport is really at the center. And urbanization, however, the definition is not only about people from rural area migrating to the big metropolitan areas. It is also a process of having areas actually convert or transform into urban areas. Now, I would like to focus on the second part, actually. So not about rural dwellers moving to the urban areas. Why is this particular transformation of rural into urban area important? Because of a number of things. If we look at these gears together, the domestic economic resilience, the new rural paradigm, and the emergence of small town and infrastructure requirement. So the new rural paradigm basically talks about the fact that people are more affluent today. They're exposed to information, they're exposed to education, and we can no longer confine rural dwellers to be the same as before. I just came back from a talk show in my area, in one of the southernmost part, where it's predominantly agriculture, less industrialized than the northern part. And I spoke to some of the high school students there, and I asked, anyone aspiring to be a farmer? Nobody raised their hand. Can anyone live without internet in a day? Everybody raised their hand. So these are rural dwellers, but they are different. And what happened is, if we ignore them and we keep saying, okay, let's keep the rural area the way it is, then there will be an exodus of talent going from the local region all the way into the big cities. Is that healthy? Is that good? That remains a debate in the field of urban and regional economics and science. But nevertheless, within the context of Indonesia, the domestic economic resilience is significantly hampered by the fact that we have poor domestic connectivity. That's why we want to build the Trans-Java toll road. That's why we want to build the Poros Maritim Dunia, or the World Maritime, access, and all of that. The what do you call it? The toll out, or the sea highway, basically, which is basically what you call that is a big liner service actually. Um, all those are efforts to increase the efficiency of sending goods and people within the country. So domestic connectivity is believed to be the answer to the low domestic economic resilience we have. When the global economy has a bit of a challenge, financial market is also shocked by some crisis. Indonesia, which supposedly has a strong domestic economic power, also struggles because sending goods from Jakarta to Hong Kong is a lot cheaper than probably within Java itself. Now, I believe that domestic economic connectivity alone is not enough, and I think it says on its own because in addition to connecting, what is equally important is ensuring that there is development within the nodes. So that is why Indonesia has developed 35 strategic development areas, or wilayah pengembangan strategis. And one of the wilayah pengembangan strategis is in the southern part of Java. We call it the Southern Maritime Corridor, connecting Yogyakarta all the way to Malang. Malang has a combined GDP of about $10 billion in a year. And Yogyakarta, we all know that it's actually a main economic center, both located in the south of Java, but currently they are linked through the central part of Java instead of going through the maritime corridor. So this is one of the strategic development zones that are being developed. Now, with the domestic economic resilience requiring strong domestic connectivity and the development of economic nodes that allows for higher value addition from the raw material or natural resources, so that we're no longer transporting goods that are of low value. We don't want to carry coconut, as it is, because it's inefficient. The shape is irregular. You have hollow parts that, meaning you're carrying air, but you're using the space. I mean, I saw in High Street that they sell coconut, they shape it like evenly, like a box. So I believe when they transport it, there's no hollow spaces in between. But furthermore, we can actually transport, processed coconut, and, it has higher value with low value weight ratio or high value weight ratio. And the only way to do that is by ensuring that you have enough development in the local regions. Now, with all this coming together, the new rural paradigm requiring development of rural areas, we need to strengthen the domestic economic nodes. Then there is a need, what we call as the emergence of small towns and the associated infrastructure requirements. So we need intermediary cities because those are the foundation of a strong, especially in the case of Indonesia, strong domestic economic resilience. So in order to develop that, and in Habitat 3, in UN conference, one of the key takeaway and agreed aspect by all the stakeholders is rural-urban continuum. That you can't talk about big cities and ignore the fact that they are an inseparable system from the rural area. So you have hierarchies of cities, rural area, intermediary cities, and you have the big cities. And this system has to work. Otherwise, you will have a backwash ecological impact coming from this imbalance. So I invest a lot of time in my presentation to talk about this, but this is important foundation to then come into the perspective of what we want to see, what innovation we want to bring in terms of infrastructure in rural areas and small towns. So if we go to the next slide. So what are the challenges and innovation when we talk about infrastructure? Over time, we have technological development, like what has been described by Jebsen Jessen. I think increased commercial experience, things that weren't money-making things, can actually make money today. There's commercial experience. People are more accustomed to taking on risk. In the past, we all know that construction is even government-driven. The state-owned construction companies actually take on an input basis, but now we can do output specification for procurement of civil constructions, and we can even do extended service period. So there are experience and expertise that develop and improve ability to pay. People now have the economic capacity to pay for essential services, and this makes it possible to accelerate what would have otherwise been, impossible to extend or expand infrastructure to reach on more people. What are the challenges? The challenges is political process are getting more and more complex. Decision making is getting more and more complex. You have more stakeholders to align in order to get into, and I think Atif is, this is what I learned from you actually. And land acquisition over time, as areas get developed, it gets more complicated. When it's still greenfield, it's easy, but when people start settling there and cost of land acquisition increase, it's challenging. Legacy of lower tariff. What I'm saying is, if you want to build a water, you want to expand or build a clean water system, what was built 20 years ago could have a much lower tariff than a new facility you're building today, delivering the same water. And people compare. My neighbor is paying a legacy of a lower tariff, and I have to pay the tariff that replaces the cost today. And that lowers the willingness to pay. And this is an issue. And also the cost of human resources nowadays are increasing because of more opportunities to take on different jobs. So over time, these things, innovation increases the favorable factors. So what influences this in order to ensure that the favorable ones can address the unfavorable ones, or innovation can address the challenges, is the public sector policy, the stakeholder support, and of course how we accumulate and get knowledge. Like this kind of forum is very important because I learned a lot of important things in terms of solutions for addressing some of the inherent challenges in developing rural infrastructure. Next slide. Sorry, I can. Now, within the context of small town, I look at three important aspects. First, from the financing, the technology, and environment. Now, in terms of financing, the issue would be the ability to pay off the rural population of the small towns, whether they have the income, they have the space to actually be able to pay for essential services, and the risk appetite of the investors. Do they have the appetite to expand their outreach to the rural areas? But this is the key. In Indonesia, you only know Jakarta, you only know probably Surabaya, Medan, Makassar, Bandung, maybe Semarang, maybe not more than 10 big cities. But there are 500 local governments. 500 local governments all around Indonesia, and that is your opportunity. So I am also the vice chairman, the co-president of the Association of Regions, or Asosiasi Bupati Seluruh Indonesia, and I'm telling you that, and you combine all the fiscal capacity and the GDP, it's significant. And that is where the opportunity lies. But the risk appetite has to be bridged. We got to make sure that the investors are familiar with the risk. So we need to innovate that. How do we bridge the transition? This is where we inevitably need to leverage it with public sector, which is why currently innovation like availability payment scheme can allow us. I will talk a bit more about that in the next slide. The technology, economies of scale. Usually you don't come up with very big mega projects. Although I think again, your suggestion is don't build big dams. You build smaller dams, you get it done on time, and you get more of it. So actually, we are doing that in Trenggalek right now, 3 dams program. But we see small-scale solutions, like we see the multi-purpose loaders and heavy equipment, and it's needed because I have heavy equipments that I cannot mobilize when I had the landslide because the road is cut into half, and I cannot mobilize that to complete some of the important construction. So small-scale solutions do exist nowadays, remote solutions. In terms of environment, sorry, something missing there, but in terms of preserving the nature, of course, the innovation again comes in terms of how we enhance efficiency of, and also how environmental impact assessments are more developed in terms of predicting, because environmental is not just about compliance, it's actually about risk management. You can have it checked, you can complete the checklist, you can get the approval, but then again, after you finish the environmental permit, when something happened, your project still cannot go through. You cannot say that I got my EIA approved, because if your project still creates environmental impact, you have to face it. And that's the thing, risk management improves in environment.